1995, the name of the city of Bombay was changed to Mumbai, and a year later, in 1996, the name of the city of Madras was changed to Chennai. As today's case dates back to the 1950s, I will refer to both cities as Bombay and Madras, as that is what they were known as when this crime occurred. Alavandar lived in Madras. During World War II, he had worked as a sub-divisional officer at the army headquarters in Awadhi, and when the war finished, he found employment selling pens at a very popular and very respectable shop named Gem & Company. He proved to be a very good salesperson. He was charming and helpful and would always appear very smartly dressed. Although he liked his job, he really wanted to work for himself and have his own business. Now in his early 40s, the opportunity arose for him to set up a small company where he could sell small plastic goods. These colourful items were inexpensive and attracted a lot of attention from curious shoppers in early 1950s Madras. He had been fortunate as he had been given permission to set up his store in front of the much larger Gem & Company shop where he had previously worked as a salesman. This location was good as Gem & Company was a well-established business which had many customers, all who would have to pass Alavandar's store in order to enter their shop, and Alavandar's friendly and persuasive nature meant that his business prospered. As his store sold household plastic items, it was mainly women that looked around and purchased his goods. Having such a large female customer base, he decided that it may be profitable to also sell saris, and came up with a way for his customers to purchase them by paying by instalments. This proved to be very popular, and as more ladies came to his store, his business grew. Some, however, would occasionally not have enough money to pay the instalments, so despite the fact that he was married with 2 children, Alavandar would allow them a payment break in exchange for certain sexual favours. In the summer of 1951, a young lady named Devaki came to the store. She was originally from Kerala and now lived with her parents in Madras. Alavandar wasted no time in using his charm to try and seduce her, and by October of the same year, they would meet at a local hotel. When she realised that he was married, Devaki broke off the relationship. In May 1952, she met an insurance clerk named Prabhakara Menon, and the following month, they got married. Now focused on her future, she thought she could put her past and Alavandar behind her, and along with her husband, she moved to a rented property in the Royapuram district of Madras. Here they were able to employ a boy to assist with cooking and cleaning. Everything seemed to be going well for the couple. Prabhakara was earning more money as he had changed his employment to a better paid position at the Freedom newspaper. The newspaper generated much of its revenue through the companies that placed advertisements in it, one of which was a small plastic store ran by Alavandar. When Prabhakara met Alavandar to discuss the possibility of him increasing the size of his adverts, Alavandar offered Prabhakara his congratulations on marrying such a beautiful lady. Prabhakara considered it strange that someone was talking about the woman he had recently married, and wondered exactly how well the store owner and his wife actually knew each other. He questioned Devaki, who denied that she had ever had any relationship with Alavandar, but Prabhakara sensed that she seemed anxious and uneasy about answering his questions. Over the following weeks, he continued to question her until towards the end of August, when they had gone out to the Minerva Theatre in the city's historical thoroughfares of Broadway. Devaki, who was by now exasperated by her husband's continued questioning, told him the truth and explained that she had once had a relationship with Alavandar before she and Prabhakara knew each other. She then informed him that since the 2 men first met, Alavandar had contacted her, saying that he would not place advertisements in the newspaper unless she renewed their relationship. Prabhakara was beside himself with rage. How dare the store owner disrespect him and his wife? On August the 28th, Mrs. Alavandar went to bed. Her husband had not come home from work, but she presumed that he was out with other business owners and would return around midnight. However, when she awoke on the 29th of August, he was still not back. Somewhat worried, she went to his business. She spoke to other store owners and soon discovered that he had gone off with a woman shortly after 12 p.m, but he had said that he would return to the store within a couple of hours. No one, however, had seen or heard from him since. The staff of the pen company told her that her husband left the shop the previous day around noon with a woman who came to meet him, and he told them that he was going to Royapuram. She was told that the woman he had left with was from Kerala and lived at 62 Cemetery Road in the Royapuram district. She went to the house and knocked on the door. It was answered by Prabhakara, who told her that he had not seen her husband and he would not have any reason to come to his home. By now she was getting worried about her husband's whereabouts, as he had never just disappeared before. She returned to the store, where she saw the owner of Gem & Company, who told her that she should go to the police, and he agreed to accompany her to the station, where Mrs. Alavandar reported her husband missing. In 1952, Madras was a large city with a population of 1.5 million people, so if Alavandar had wanted to disappear for a while, it would not have been a difficult thing to do. But he had a store, a wife, and children, and this was totally out of character for him, so the police took the statement from Mrs. Alavandar very seriously. 500 kilometres away, in Manu Madurai, the passengers in the third-class carriage of the Indo-Ceylon Express train that had left Madras at 8 p.m. the previous day alerted the guard that there was a green trunk under one of the seats, from which was emanating a terrible smell. The train was halted at the station and the police were called to investigate. When they opened the trunk, they discovered a decapitated human body. The humidity and the heat had accelerated the rate of decomposition, so the police wasted no time in taking the trunk to the mortuary so a post-mortem could be performed. The pathologist observed that there were stab wounds to the chest, which could have been the cause of death. There was, however, nothing found in the trunk that could help identify the deceased. When the inspector at the Esplanade police station in Madras learned that a headless corpse was found on a train that had left the city a few hours after Alavandar had last been seen, he wondered if it was possible that it could be the missing man. The investigation into finding Alavandar was led by Inspector Ramanathan, who sent one of his constables to the house at 62 Cemetery Road, where it was reported the woman last seen with Alavandar lived. But when the constable arrived, there was no one home. He spoke to the neighbours, who said that the family had left the house and that they believed that they may have gone to Bombay. Inspector Ramanathan arrived and entered the property. There were traces of blood. The inspector then asked for local people if they had seen anything suspicious. The next day, a policeman on his daily round saw an object floating in the bay. He went to the seashore and reached out to look at what it was. It was wrapped in a brown shirt. He managed to pull it to the shore. When he looked closer, he was shocked to discover that it was a human head. Finding the head in Madras and finding a headless body on a train that had started its journey in Madras led Inspector Ramanathan to conclude that in all probability the head belonged to the body, which he believed was that of the missing Alavandar. The body was transported to Madras, where a second post-mortem was carried out, the results of which confirmed the inspector's suspicions that the head and the body were from the same person. Fingerprints were taken and they matched those from Alavandar's military records. Mrs. Alavandar also confirmed that the deceased was her husband. The police now had the identity of the victim, but they did not have the person or people responsible for the crime. They needed to speak to Prabhakara and Devaki Menon. Inspector Ramanathan travelled to Bombay and, with the assistance of the Bombay police, managed to trace the suspects who were staying in the home of one of Prabhakara's relatives. They went to the house and arrested them before escorting them back to Madras. While the inspector was in Bombay, his police team had been gathering evidence. Other important items were found, including the knife that he had used to commit the terrible crime. They also spoke to the owner of the store where the knife had been purchased, who confirmed that it was bought by a man that looked very much like Prabhakara on the 28th of August. The police also interviewed the accused couple's 13-year-old servant boy, who told them that he had heard Prabhakara and Devaki talk about a man. He also said that he heard Prabhakara tell his wife to get him back to the house, where they could rid themselves of him. He also said that when her husband was at work, Devaki would sometimes go to her room and cry. On the 28th of August, Prabhakara had given him some money and told him not to return until after dark. He said that when he did, Devaki looked solemn and was washing some clothes. He asked if he could help, but she told him that she would do it herself. The police also managed to find a faintly blood-stained sari, which they presumed Devaki had worn on the day of the murder. In the house, a palm print was visible on the kitchen wall, and tests proved that it was the palm of Prabhakara. Blood was also found under a stone grinder. Slowly, the inspector was piecing together the events of August the 28th, 1952. Everything pointed to Prabhakara and Devaki Menon being the killers, but there are no eyewitnesses, and the inspector could not be completely certain exactly how the events unfolded that night. In order to secure a conviction, he offered Devaki a deal. In exchange for a full pardon, she would give evidence against Prabhakara. Devaki, however, was not interested in any deal. She remained completely loyal to her husband. The story had filled the newspapers and intrigued the public. So when the trial began at the Madras High Court, the courtroom was full and large crowds gathered outside. Prabhakara and Devaki Menon both pleaded not guilty to all charges. The prosecution told the court that this was a planned and premeditated murder, the husband doing away with his wife's lover. They called many witnesses and built up a very strong case against the accused. The store owner who sold the knife used in the crime confirmed that he sold it to the male defendant on the morning of the 28th of August, and the servant boy confirmed he had been sent out all day and told not to come back until midnight. Staff at Gem & Company told the court that Devaki had visited Alavandar's store that day, and he then went off to her house shortly after. A rickshaw driver also said that he had taken the deceased to the house. Neighbours stated that they had seen Alavandar entering the house. They knew it was him, as he was a frequent visitor. There were, however, no witnesses who had seen him leave. The prosecution claimed that Devaki had gone to the store in the morning with the sole purpose of luring Alavandar to her house, where her husband was waiting to do away with him. And after murdering him, they cut off his head so he could not be identified and put the body in a green steel chest, which Prabhakara then transported to the train station, where, with the help of a guard, he managed to put it under a seat in a third-class carriage of the Indo-Ceylon Express. On his way back, he threw the knife away and wrapped the severed head in Alavandar's shirt, carried it to the Royapuram beach and buried it in the sand, probably unaware that it would soon be revealed with the constant pull of the tide and the waves. The defence, however, said that the death of Alavandar was an accident. They claimed that he had followed Devaki home and was pressurising her to resume their relationship. When he started to force himself upon her, Prabhakara, who was in the kitchen cutting vegetables, rushed out to assist his wife. A scuffle followed, and the knife accidentally struck Alavandar in the chest. The prosecution countered the defence's claim that this was an accident, and they called the doctor who had undertaken the second autopsy to the stand. He said that the deceased had died by a knife wound that was inflicted with considerable force and the wounds were not consistent with an accidental death caused when two people had been fighting. The doctor described how Alavandar had died, and by using diagrams and a model of a body, he was able to explain exactly how the injuries had been caused. The trial ended on the 13th of August 1953. The judge summed up the case and strangely reminded the jury that the crime was committed due to the improper behaviour of the store owner. When the jury returned to deliver the verdict and the judge asked them if they found the defendants guilty or not guilty, the jury foreman replied, "Guilty." The judge then sentenced Prabhakara Menon to 7 years in prison and his wife Devaki to 3 years. The sentences seemed very light, especially as the maximum punishment was death. Prabhakara's lawyer advised against trying to appeal. Some of the press reported that the judge was from Kerala, the same state as Devaki, and that was why the sentence was so lenient. But others stated that the lighter sentence was due to the morals involved in the case. The couple were sent to separate prisons, and both were released early due to good behaviour. When they were reunited, they left Madras and moved to Kerala, where they set up a number of small businesses and eventually opened a hotel. In the prayer room, they hung a picture of the judge who had presided over the trial. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I will see you in the next brief case